Yes.
of one's identity.
Yes.
There's
which-
also the check boxes. right?
Yeah,
That
exactly,
You don't see in
exactly.
other countries where you have to check off a box.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah.
But then on the other hand, we have, I learned here this term of gender fluid,
Yes.
which in
Oh, yeah.
Europe, I mean,
Now,
Now.
gender identity is
Now.
becoming, the barriers are breaking down.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mhm.
Which is not true in Europe yet.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like I
Probably.
still have to say woman or man, like
Yeah.
Yes.
not even intersex.
Yes.
Or,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's it's
Yeah.
that whole thing of context. I think that's why it's so fascinating to be in a different country. But you know, like the Kempers, I mean, you're talking about, you know, why we like teaching international students. Now, the Kempers are all European, as of course am I, but we don't think of ourselves as European, do we?
of course.
Do we? You know, other people might say, oh, they're all European, so therefore they might think a certain way. Not at all.
And be friends and
There's
and
France,
there's-
Italy, Norway, England, they're totally different.
Yeah.
So I never, you know, we don't use those generalizations to say European, but sometimes people will say American, and then when you travel around this country, it's incredibly diverse.
Mhm.
Or people will say, you know, American Indian.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's different from each other as, you know,
It's
Greece
true.
and Norway.
It's absolutely true, but I would say that there is a difference, and I mean, thinking about class right here, I do think that even again, as I was saying, the writing, and there is a difference between the Kemper scholars and the other students, no matter which country you may be from,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, can you
Which
explain?
is European, I guess,
Yes,
compared
yes. No, no,
to
absolutely.
Thai or, you know, whatever
Right.
other
There's some commonality
nationalities.
within
There's-
that, but
Yeah,
then there's difference, yeah,
Yeah.
compared with, say,
Yeah.
Southeast Asia.
Yeah,
Sure,
exactly.
sure. And often it's cultural,
yeah.
the Christian, the
Yeah.
Judeo-Christian
The
heritage,
tradition, right?
whatever
yeah.
it might be,
Mhm.
whatever. But then again, that's harder now because of immigration patterns in Europe.
Right,
That's not as
clear cut.
clear cut. Maybe it never was, but it certainly isn't now. So that's becoming much more complicated too, right? Hmm.
Interesting.
Do you want to ask something?
I think I wasn't there at the beginning, so I don't want to repeat a question.
Well,
but,
ask anyway, because it probably won't be.
And if we say we just answered that, you
Yeah.
know, so.
Exactly.
Did you share some anecdotes? Anyone who stood out to you? Remember?
Many stand out. Oh, so many
Something
stand out.
funny,
Oh my God.
interesting, or challenging?
Well, actually, I mean, since we were talking about
I'm reluctant to do
about
that.
race
Yeah.
identity, I remember this one class like a few years ago, and there was this student, not one of the Kemper scholars. It was.
I'm
a
going to
student-
remember this as soon as Flavia
I
picks up.
think that was Kathy's.
Oh,
that
Kathy
that
had
was
that
not
group?
your group. Yeah, that was Kathy's
Okay.
group. And this student said, we were reading Sula, right? I remember this student made this completely incorrect point, which was something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, that the African slaves wanted to come to the United States for the economic opportunities
And slavery?
during slavery. And it was one of the strangest sort of things that I've ever heard. And I was like,
What
but
do you
you're
mean?
confusing.
Yeah.
I mean, slavery happened centuries ago and nobody wanted to come here as a slave. Plus there were no economic opportunities if you're being owned by somebody else and, you know, forced to work under those conditions. You're confusing that with 20th century and
American.
end of the 19th and you know 20th century immigration, which is a little bit different. No. And then he wanted to talk about Reconstruction and after the Civil War. And there was this one moment when every student in the class was looking at this one student and just saying, "You are wrong. Will you stop it?" He wouldn't. It was one of the most, I mean, intense and sort of unsatisfying classes I remember, you know,
Where
in
do
all
you-
my years.
And where do you think that thought comes from? His country, or
I have no idea. I have no idea because
Sometimes people
obviously,
just get things wrong.
and the students were quoting the history. They were like, "Don't you remember with Dr. Dalton? We look." I mean, every other student in the
Dr. Dalton
class.
does not look at the economic opportunities of slavery.
Don't they?
Guaranteed.
wow.
So that one, I remember that one day when everybody was like, no. And
Yeah, I don't have those kinds of, I don't, I
But
was
that was
sitting
unusual,
here.
but that was,
Yes.
that's why I remember, because it's usually not like that.
No, I tend to have more memories of people coming from difficult places. The young lady who was from Syria a couple of years ago.
Mira.
Yes,
Just or hearing people talk about their home countries. I do remember last year we were talking about the Cold War. We'd gotten into the 50s. We were talking about the Cold War. We were talking about anti-communism in America, and looking at some foreign policy issues, the thing in Guatemala, the thing in Iran. And we were asking, was that really anti-communism? Are there other issues at play here? And there was a young man who came from a country that used to be under the Soviet Union, and he was explaining that, let's be careful, we can't. The conversation went, and I had to sort of explain that I wasn't a Stalinist, and it was kind of an interesting moment. That because I was questioning whether the United States necessarily always acted from an anti-communist bias, whether there were other things at play, I wasn't actually supporting Soviet communism. And it was kind of one of those funny moments where I actually say, well, I'm actually not a pro-Stalin. I'm not a pro-Stalin type person. And it's things like that can happen sometimes. And it wasn't all everyone, but it's things like that I notice sometimes, and that can come from someone's perspective. They might look at America. It's that context. They might say, well, look, my country was under the Soviet Union, it was horrible. Yeah, of course. But then when you're in the United States, you've got to look at that context. Of course you can compare, but you've got to try and see things from what's happening here and why as well. It doesn't mean you're supporting something that probably was worse. But very interesting. Things like that are fascinating in class, I think, sometimes.
There's some wonderful moments when we've had guest visitors to the class over the year. We had Julia Alvarez once come and visit, and she did a whole class with the international students. Don't ask me the year because I don't remember. I remember her in class.
It's not that long ago.
It was a few years back. It was not last year. She came to campus last year.
I think it was very recent.
It was an earlier visit soon after I had started teaching the class. It was amazing to have her there, and we've had a few other visitors over the years, and it's the kind of group that always makes so much of one of those
good
moments, right? With professors or other guests or authors or poets or whoever's visiting the department who has the time to come and be in class with us, or we visit the creative writing class or whatever other class that's hosting somebody. That's always a treat, I think.
I'm sure both of you have mentioned already how many years you have taught and who taught around you, so we kind of capture who was teaching the two classes.
I've done it for years and years and years and years with a small break. Kathy Dalton did it for maybe 3-4 years. Otherwise, I've done it for a long time. I don't actually remember how many years. I really don't.
I might be wrong. I think it was David Powell who used to teach it before me.
We know that Nancy Sizer taught history.
Okay, that's before my time. And before David, it was Carol Bailey.
Okay.
Carol Bailey taught the international students English when I first came.
Okay.
And I didn't teach it when I first came. I don't know who taught the history, actually.
And let me ask one other question. I know both of you are very passionate and are very good at teaching these two classes, but what do you think? You have colleagues around you who could also teach this class. Is it challenging? What does it take to teach this class?
We actually talked a little bit about that.
And I could add one thing. I didn't say this before. I do actually think some of my colleagues would prefer not to deal with the writing. Would prefer not to deal with students who start here, even though they go like this. I think I'm not a sort of heavy hitter U.S. history person. It's not my background. So I see it as stories. I think some teachers would not want to do 2 terms and not be able to cover as much. They wouldn't get to the things that they love as much, maybe, because they know more US history than I do. So I don't mind the language issue.
And you understand us
Yeah.
more.
Maybe I don't mind the language
So
issue.
personal connection.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me.
That's
I like, I come from an international house. My mother's not English. I love all that. I love the mixture. I love it. It's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what would you say that the campus scholars bring not only to the classroom but to the community as a whole?
That's a
That's
wonderful
harder for
question.
me to say.
Well, it's interesting because every now and then we have these faculty meetings, every few years or so, when the quote-unquote PG program is discussed.
Yes.
And it's always this, and what they mean really by the quote-unquote PG program, whenever that question is raised in faculty
They're not
meetings,
talking about you
it's
guys.
always about the domestic PGs.
Yeah, they're
It's
not talking
never-
about you guys.
And
right.
then,
And
you
we're always
have
like,
faculty member
Yeah.
after faculty member after faculty member standing up and, most of the time complaining about the PGs and for whatever reason. And then there are always the people who stand up and then defend them and say, there's a reason why these kids are here and they're actually great kids, et cetera, et cetera. Every time that conversation happens,